Ready?
Yeah, I think we're all good.
Okay.
Okay, so can I ask you to say your name and spell it and tell us what rank and unit you were in?
I'm Robert Thurman Tidwell, Jr. My last name is spelled Tidwell.
Okay, what rank were you?
I was a private.
Okay, and what unit were you in?
I was in the 85C.
Okay, so can you tell me where you started, like where you came in when you joined the 10th Mountain Division?
Well, I was working in New York at the time. I had a low draft number, and my brother-in-law told me to come up there. I had been up to New York City for the World's Fair in '39, and he told me to come up there since I had a low draft number and enjoy myself for a few months, as long until I was called. And so I got there, and I went to see the Yankees and the Dodgers, and all of them play baseball, and the Giants, and went to all the resort areas like Coney Island, Jones Beach, and I got tired of that, and I said, well, I think I'm gonna go to trade school, since I had just gotten out of high school. And so they had one in Brooklyn that taught aviation sheet metal. So I went there, and after about 3 months, I believe it was, Brewster Aircraft took the graduates from that school, and I happened to be one of them. They had an office, a manufacturing plant for the Navy Corsair fighter in Long Island City, and I lived in Astoria on Ditmars Boulevard, and so I was hired. I worked in the wings section, and that's where the wings fold up so the planes can go in the aircraft carriers. And I happened to be in New York City one weekend at Times Square. I bumped into my brother. I have two brothers, and one of them was commissioned a first lieutenant at Yale University, and he went with the 8th Air Force to England when they were having all the blitzkrieg from Germany on London and those areas there. And my other brother, he had a low draft number, and he was in the National Guards before the war, like most high school kids did. They wanted to make a little extra money, and that was one way to do it. And so he was in the National Guard. Well, when he got his draft number and it was low, he said, I'm not going with the Army, I'm going in the Navy. And so they got discharged, and he went to the Navy in Norfolk, Virginia. Well, that's what I'm getting to. I got in New York City at Times Square on a Saturday night. I didn't even know where he was, because the last I'd heard from him, he was, on patrol to taking supplies to Norway and Sweden and those areas, and Russia in the Navy. They were an escort for other ships that carried supplies and things. So I was walking in Times Square, enjoying myself and fixing to go to a theater, and I bumped into him. He had two guys from his ship there, and I said, well, let's go out to see my sister and her husband. I called him and told him that we're going out, and we took the L out there, the elevated train, and right by LaGuardia Field, and so we spent about 2 hours out there, and then they got a call to come back to the ship, that they had an emergency. So my brother-in-law drove them back to the ship at Brooklyn Navy Yard, which we were in Queens, and that was Brooklyn Navy Yard was in Brooklyn. And they got on the ship, and they went out, and that's the last I had heard from him until I got a call from my mother, and she told me that Paul's ship, the U.S. Jacob Jones, had been sunk off the Cape May, New Jersey. They went on an emergency call out there to a convoy that was going, and one of the ships got torpedoed. Well, when they got out there and that ship, they got torpedoed too. It went down in about 2 or 3 minutes. They lost 174 men, and he was one of 8. The only reason he was alive was he was on duty. The ones that were on duty, they lived. And he said that some of the other ships picked up a few of the survivors, but the water was so cold they caught hypothermia and died, you know. And they had to get off the ships in a hurry, and they naturally didn't have any time to change into better clothing. But that's the last I'd heard from them, and I had a deferment to work at Brewster Aircraft because they needed the Navy Corsair fighter for the aircraft carriers. They got so many destroyed at Pearl Harbor and everything. So when his ship got torpedoed, I said, I'm going in the service. So I called my draft board, and they told me they'd take me right away. So I went home to Alabama and went in the service and trained at basic training at Camp Landing, Florida, like most of the northern boys. They were all northern boys from New York, New Jersey, and up the East Coast. And I did my basic training, and then they kept me there to take a combat intelligence course. I had a pretty good IQ at that time, don't anymore, but anyway, I took a course, and I got out of that. Let's see, I went in service in March. I got out of that in, I think it was about September, and I got a 30-day furlough, or 10-day, I forget what it was. Anyway, it was a little time. And then I reported back to Hampton Roads. That's where I met the 10th Mountain Division.
How did you meet them?
Huh?
How did you meet them?
I guess I was assigned there. You know, they were going overseas. They were going overseas, and they needed personnel, and so I think that they just took people and sent them up there to go with the division. And I went over to Naples, Italy, and then I waited around there at Camp Hale. I believe it was Mussolini's, they took over his property, took over Mussolini's property there, and that was a center for people. And then they took me, and I went on a LST up to Leghorn. And when I got off, I looked out there at the harbor, and there was stacks of supplies, 2 and 3 stories high. It looked like buildings. And then when we got on and left the LST and took trucks and went up to by Pisa, and that's where the 10th Mountain was also. Then we went to a unit at night, and all I remember was a little bitty bungalow house, and it was sitting right on the side of the mountain. You couldn't go out the back door, it was just the front door. And they were all in there, and that was the 85th, part of it, you know, a company of it, or a squad or something. Anyway, everybody was on the floor sleeping and stuff, and the windows were all covered up. No lights were allowed, no nothing. And we stayed there a few days, and then that's when we got to go to go up Belvedere.
Okay, I'm gonna take you back.
I'm sorry to take up so much long, but
No,
that's
this is
just
great.
that's
This
just
is
part
great.
of my experience.
Yeah, I'm gonna take you back to when you first joined the 85th.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like for you coming in after Camp Hale and Camp Swift? Did you feel any kind of resentment from the other men who had been there? What was
Well,
it
it was that way at first, yes, because they were specialized troops,
Well,
and
he
we
didn't
were
go to Camp
we
Hale.
were recruits. I went to Camp Hale later on, Susan. Just I think most of us felt that way, I would say. But after you were there a while, it was, and you know, we went right into battle at Belvedere. That broke everybody down on equal basis. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you prepare prepare? Did you help the 86th prepare to go up Riva Ridge? Did you?
Well,
make any noises?
I went up Belvedere with the 85th,
Mm-hmm.
85th C Company, and then we went over, after we climbed Belvedere, we went over Riva Ridge and out it.
Okay. So what was it like then preparing to go up Belvedere? What kind of preparations did you do? What was it like climbing up Belvedere?
Well,
I know you made the assault during the day.
It was tough. Some of them got in minefields, and some of them went up. And we got a lot of firing and mortar, and the German 88s were terrible, but I think they lost quite a few men in a minefield. I think, well, injured rather. It was tough. It was tough. Well, none of us had ever experienced anything like that. And it was a long, hard climb.
Yeah. Did you have a special friend, like just one person or a group of guys that you really bonded with when you
Well, yeah, the squad, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about him.
Well, most of them, one particular was, he was also from Alabama. He was a law school student, Pat Driver. He had been over in North Africa and fought over there, but he was, let's see, I believe he was a fireman, I think. I believe that's what he really was over there. And they brought him over as infantry, I guess. And,
what did you guys do together?
well, we did a lot of things together, but what happened was in the 85th, after we got up there on the top of the ridge and through quite a bit of heavy fighting and stuff like that, a little while later there was a bunch of our squad. We were just sitting around in the sun enjoying ourselves because it had been so strenuous. I guess it was maybe 10 days or 3 weeks. We're sitting out there, and we were all just talking, carrying on like you would as a group of boys. There's 8 or 10 of us in the squad that was sitting around there at that time. And up over the ridge comes a chicken, and one of the guys says, "Look at that chicken out there." And the rest of it was in the valley there. There wasn't nothing over there packed behind him. And the chicken walked on up in there, and one of them says, "Boy, that sure would be good to have a roasted chicken." Another guy says, "Somebody will shoot him. I'll clean him." Another guy says, "I'll build a fire." And another one said, "Well, I'll get splits and we'll use a cleaning rod to put him on." And so one of them punched me and said, "You the one that ought to shoot him." And I said, "I don't know about this. It's pretty quiet." And they said, "Well, just go ahead. Won't nobody pay any attention to it." So I cracked down on him, killed the pigeon. The chicken shot him right through the head. And I said, "Well, I'm not going out there and get him." It was about 150 or 200 yards out there. It's a good ways from anybody and other people that were around us. It was just a clear shot over the side of the mountain. And they got that chicken, cleaned him. Boy, we were eating him, having a good time. They said, "Since you shot him, you can have half the breast." And the other guy says, "Well, I'm going to barbecue him. I'm going to get the other breast." And says, "Anybody else can say what they want." And, so they did. And we sit around there and laughed and ate that chicken. Some of them would come by and say, "Where'd y'all get that chicken?" And it took a little while to do it, but it was a break from what we'd gone through.
I bet, yeah.
Well, the next day I got in trouble. Nobody else did. A company commander sent somebody around to see who fired that shot. He said, "Y'all know that y'all could have caused somebody to get killed maybe. Says the Germans could have started sending mortars over here or 88, fire 88s at us." And And we really didn't think of that. We were just young people, and chicken looked good, but I got in trouble over it.
He did help somebody to safety, and you might ask
Okay. So, what was it like for the shelling? You mentioned the 88s. What was it like when you
Oh,
were
God.
shelled?
Going up Belvedere was nothing. When we started down Riva Ridge, and we, I think, got on the wrong side. It was probably out by Della Spey or Della Teresa anyway. We got on the wrong side, and I told everybody to dig in. Everybody dug foxholes, but we started getting the worst shelling you ever saw. I think we went over there at night, and the next morning, you could just hear them mortars just walking up there to us, and rocket 88s coming in, hitting tree bursts and stuff like that. And it was terrible, but we couldn't move during the daytime. We had to stay out there, and the next morning it was the same thing. That was the worst. That is one of the worst I've ever seen. It was terrible. But they got a command to move back on the other side of the hill, so we all did that. And then the fighting continued. We went on about whatever we had to do, what the company commander said.
Okay, so after Belvedere, you went down from Riva Ridge?
Riva Ridge, yeah, to Della Teresa and those areas there.
Okay, can you
Della
describe
Torre.
what you did?
Huh?
You did?
What?
Can you describe what all you did coming down off of Riva Ridge? What
Well,
else happened from there?
We were broke up into different companies, and there were other platoons around, but we went as a platoon, marched down the ridge and spread out and followed each other. And as I went down the ridge, I was the second one in line behind the platoon squad leader. And we heard the loudest bang you ever saw, and he just fell down right in front of us there. But he was one that carried grenades around his waist, and one of the pins must have come out. He liked to sort of bend them so they'd pull out easy, and one of them must have slipped out, or either a shot or something hit his grenade, and it went off and it just ripped him apart. That was the first American we, saw up close. Because when we were doing any fighting elsewhere, you knew that a lot of them got hit and stuff like that, but you never saw anybody just completely dead and bleeding. And he uttered 3 words, and all 3 words was "Mama, Mama, Mama, help me." I tell you, it was terrible. He died instantly, and I think a priest came over, and he was Catholic, and gave him rice.
That's horrible. So, your daughter mentioned that you saved someone?
What?
Your daughter mentioned that you saved someone?
Oh yes, a little further on, we were dug in, and at another place we spent a little time, stopped maybe overnight or the day. There was a boy from Willie Weems from up in Tennessee. We got hit pretty bad that day, and he got up and was hollering, "I'm hit, I'm hit." And the medics were busy, and so he kept on, and we were, well, probably the foxholes, so I was probably as far as that wall over there or something like that. There's not much distance between us. And so I jumped up and said, heck, I'll bandage him up and take him down to the aid station. And I asked somebody where the aid station was. Says it's down at the foot of the hill, about 3 to 5 miles. I said, well, how do you get down there? I said, nobody knew the way. And I said, well, I'll take him. So I got him out and bandaged his leg up as best I could with some, I think it was underwear shirt, and put his boot back on, laced it up as best I could. And he would hobble, and he held onto my shoulder, and I had his gun and my gun, and we went down the hill. We got about halfway down the hill, or maybe a third of the way down the hill. I heard a zip, zip, as the German shots. I says, oh my God, that's a sniper. I started running over there to a gully that was going down where I guess it was made by runoff of water from up at the top. We jumped in that thing, and I said, Willie, I know this is hurting you, but says, we got to do something. We can't move on because we'll get killed. And I said, you stay right here, and I'm going to go up because he's going to think we're going to be going down. I'm going to go up a little ways, and I want you to, when I get up there, I want you to put your helmet on your rifle and raise it, and then I'll see if I can see him fire. And believe it or not, he did fire, and he didn't hit Willie's thing because he shot at us about 4 or 5 times. But after that first shot, I was going like this with Willie the best I could, and I guess he couldn't keep it on us. And we jumped right in that gully. That's the only place we could get. There wasn't no trees, nothing there except just sage and stuff. So I saw him shoot, and he was up in a tree. And it was really a frightening experience. I was trembling, so I quietened down, and I waited a little while, and I thought he'd come down out of the tree, but he never did. So I shot him, and then I went over there to see if he was dead, and he was dead. And he had a great big German watch. A great big watch with ruby numbers on it. I took that watch and I took a picture of him. I still got the picture of him, and he was a highly decorated Nazi SS officer. And so that's the only close-up experience I had with a German, because when you're out as a group, anybody could be shooting at the same person, and it'd just be hard to tell unless you were up really right on them that your bullet hit them. And it was better that way. But we went on down the hill, and I said, this gully, we liable to run into mines in this gully here, or grenades that go off. And I said, we got to watch it. So we started watching, and closer we got to the bottom, we got relaxed. Well, we hit a trip wire, and it was set up to alert the medical unit there that somebody was coming down, and the ravine. They were expecting probably a German or nobody or who else. Anyway, they had those trip wires there, and they set up a flare and made noise. And about 2 seconds, there was some armed guys out there and saw who we were, and everything was all right. But boy, it scared me to death. I was thinking it's going to be white sulfur or something like that and just burn you to crisp. But went on down to the aid station. They took care of Willie right away, and in a little while I was just resting there and getting something to eat. And here comes a pack of Alpini with the mules, and they were going up the hill to top to take ammunition up there and stuff. So I said, well, I'll just fall in with them. I went right with them up to the top, rejoined my unit. But that was quite an experience, I'll tell you.
Yeah. What was it like when you killed the SS officer? Did you feel sick? Did you feel relieved?
I felt relieved. We were in an area that had been taken, and I don't know how much over that way had been taken, but that sniper was out there, and he was up in that tree, and I wasn't expecting nothing like that, and I guess nobody else would have under the conditions. But boy, that scared the devil out of me, and I'm sure it did Willie. Boy, I took him as fast as I could. We just fell down in that ravine like whatever it was, went down the side of the mountain there. Water washed out it, I guess. Gully. Then I got it back up to the company there, and everything was all right.
Yeah. After you rejoined your company, what happened?
Well, they moved on out to other areas, and I just followed them,
Where
just
did you go?
with them. Yeah, I have no idea. I didn't even know anything about the name of Della Spey and Della Teresa or them. Only thing I knew definitely about it at the beginning was that was the big mountain, and it was named Mount Belvedere.
What were your experiences then?
Hi.
What were your experiences after you had saved Willie? What did you experience for the rest of the war?
Well, after the war?
No, for the rest of the war.
Oh, the rest of the war, it tapered off some. The biggest part of the really hard fighting was over with because we controlled the high ground, and I guess the whole company was just waiting for orders. We moved on out and went on to other areas, but there wasn't any real serious fighting. They were moving so fast till they got to the edge of the Po, and then the cliffs where it went down into the Po Valley. We just waited up there on those areas in the trees and stuff, and when they got orders to move out, we went over there. I guess they were waiting for a lot more of the companies to assemble along that area there.
What was your job in the 85th?
What?
What was your job?
I was a BAR man. That's a heavy weapons unit, rifle like. It's holds 20 rounds clip, and it weighs about, with the clip and everything, about 16 to 20 pounds. And it's a big weapon. It has a tripod on the front that you could let down, and it helps support the rifle when you were in a firing position at prone. Yeah. Made it a lot steadier. All you had to do was take a deep breath and pull the trigger. And it was one of those rifles that if you pulled the trigger, you could shoot one shot or multiple shots.
What was it like using that?
Huh?
What was it like using?
Well, I liked it because it was big and it looked deadly, and it had a long barrel on it, longer than most M1 rifles. Yeah, it's a much heavier weapon than that. It's the next thing to a machine gun, really. You could have pulled the trigger and shot 15 shots.
Okay. What did you feel like when the war ended? When you learned the war had ended?
Well, we had gone through a lot of little towns, and sometimes way ahead of the Fifth Army from what John Duffy says. Sometimes we had Germans on the front, Germans on the right, Germans on the left, and Germans back in behind the division. And we were about 50 miles ahead. I believe he said that at certain times we were way ahead of the regular Fifth Army, and they just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And we got up to Lake Garda there, and we took those ducks to go across and up the river up there, and that was the worst experience I saw, really, because I was in L Company at that time. I got transferred by the captain, Wright. He got wounded, and I got transferred later after that to L Company because of that instance about the chicken. And believe it or not, I was with some riflemen on one of the ducks, and the duck next to us was all right, but the one further on down, it was overloaded. You could see that to start with, and then they put a 75 millimeter cannon on that thing with the wheels, and it was real low. And I thought about it. I said, boy, that thing sure is so low to the water. Well, they started out, and then it wasn't hardly any time till that thing started taking water. And it got all of them, all except one. And that was a shocker. But the Germans had blown out all the tunnels over there, And we took those ducks and went right up into the end of the River Ridge up there. I mean, Lake River, or Lake Garda, Red River, yeah, was the city at the end of the lake. We went up there, stayed there a while, and a few days later, the war was over. And we stayed there and cleaned up and moved out to some of the little villages around there. All of us, I guess, separated out. But the company I was with, we moved to a little bit of town out there, and it had been a German officers, I guess, stayed there. Sort of like a hotel. Had a thing you could drive through and go in the front and drive out the back. And we got Lysol and stuff and cleaned that place up so we could live on it, because we had to sleep on the floor. A few people had got some mattress covers and stuffed them with straw and slept on them, but we slept on the floor. Yeah.
So were you elated?
That was real nice. Everybody, I think, really enjoyed that part of it. That was when we went over toward where Marshal Tito was, causing problem with Yugoslavia wanting to take some land there. And a lot of the units went over to that area to watch the border. But we were at leisure. We went down, I went over on a tour to Nice, France, and went down to Venice a few times and on passes. We went over to Milan when we went on a 3-day pass to Geneva, Leghorn, and then we went to, while we were fighting, we got a 3-day pass to go to Montecatino, yeah. And we went over there for a rest for 3 days. That's a nice place. I knew about it because when I was living in New York, I knew a lot of Italian people. I lived in a section that was Italian, and down on Grand Avenue there were Greeks. So they had told me about Montecatino. I had heard people talk about it, how nice it was and everything. It was sort of like a Hot Springs, Arkansas, a Warm Springs area.
Okay.
Any of those rest periods were great.
I bet.
Yeah.
Do you?
We had a 6x6 big army truck, and when we went to Nice, France, and we went into Monaco, we pulled right up in front of the casino and got out and went in there. And I still have a sterling silver shot glass from that. It wasn't glass, it was sterling silver shot glass. And I still got it. I kept it. I put it in my pocket when we walked out. I shouldn't be telling that, but that was, everybody picked up some kind of stuff or something. But I still have that shot glass, I sure do.
Do you have any favorite memories from?
Well, best memory was when the war was over and they passed out of the champagne and cognac they had taken from a German warehouse up there. And I got 3 German blankets with horsehair woven in it. It was gray. And I put them in a box and got the lieutenant to sign them, and I put a couple of pistols in there, a German Beretta and a Luger, German Luger. And I sent them things back. The lieutenant just asked me, says, what you got in there? And I said, I got these German blankets, they brand new. I said, I want to send them home. I might like to keep them as a souvenir. And he said, is that all? And I said, yes. And he just signed the top of the box. And that was it. It was a wooden box, and we nailed the cover on. It's gone. Got over back home, all right. But that's about the only. I had a German helmet that I had, and I had a leather web belt that German officer had with ammunition packet on it. And let's see, I got his insignia. I got I had a couple of things. I give them to my son-in-law, my nephew, my brother-in-law's kid. He went to a prep school, military academy, and he loved everything about military.
He came home on the Marine Fox.
I came home on the Marine Fox, I sure did. That was quite a trip. First atomic bomb was dropped by a boy that lived right around the corner from me. He was a bombardier. And he got to be a fine young lawyer, and he and his wife, I knew the girl, she was a Tuscaloosa girl, Josephine Strickland, and he, in fact, I dated her at one time in high school. He got his law degree, practiced law in Tuscaloosa, my hometown, yes. But about 20 years later, he shot himself. He couldn't live with it anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that happened to a lot of those people.
Yeah. Did you have any, not really reoccurrences, but any memories that are tough to live with after the war?
Well, I really tried to blank everything out. I paid no attention to towns or cities or anything we were in. All I did was just try to do my duty the best I could do it and to keep myself alive. That was the main thing. And I saw a lot of action. I saw a lot of dead people. And I saw a world of Germans. One time we had I guess it was 2,000 of them where they had brought them down the highway, and they just turned them loose down the highway, and we had come to camp. I had taken my friend from Alabama down to the aid station because he had frozen feet, and when I got back, they had started breaking all of those prisoners of war in there, and MPs had machine guns set up in several areas. But that was the largest group of Germans I ever saw. It must have been thousands of them. And I just took whatever came along and tried to keep it sane about it and forget about everything. It didn't shock me that much because that was just what we were there for. But after the war was over, I forgot everything. When they dropped the second atom bomb and we found out that we probably wouldn't have to go to Japan, boy, that was a relief. That was a terrible relief. Well, we got back and went up to Hudson River to Fort Drum, and then we disembarked and took buses back down to Fort Dix. And I got out, and that was BJJ, and when I was released from Fort Dix, and I went into New York, Times Square, had my pack and stuff. I checked it in a locker in one of the subway system in downtown, and then I just had a good time that night. Went out the next morning to my sister's, and I stayed there about 3 or 4 days and took the Southerner home, that streamlined train that ran from New York to New Orleans. I took it home. It was just an overnight trip down. And I spent 10 days, and that's when I went to Camp Carson. I had to report back to Camp Carson in Colorado. Got up to Camp Carson. Everybody was sitting around doing nothing. We went out to Hale, saw all of that, and we stayed there. I guess, I enjoyed Manitou Springs and Boulder. I spent most of my time in that area. I didn't go into Denver too much, but in Colorado Springs, I remember the old Atlas Hotel there. It was great. But I enjoyed that period of it. It was real relaxing, but I don't know. When we stayed there, let's see, from, let's see, August, and I had 10 days at home, I believe. I know it was 30 days at home. Then I went back to Camp Carson. That would probably been in October. I stayed until we went down to Camp Swift there, yeah, Camp Swift.
Okay.
We
Is-
trained up there, but it was light training in Colorado. Went take trucks and go out to Camp Hale, and then we heard about in November that they were tearing it down, and so we just really didn't train very much, didn't do many forced marches or anything like that. We just had a nice leisure time, plenty of free duty. Got down to Camp Swift, and it was just about the same thing.
Is there anything else you want to tell us?
Well, I got discharged at Camp Swift.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, I don't have much to say, but boy,
No,
I
that
tell
was
you,
good.
I was in Company 85C, and then I went to L Company when I got in that trouble, and they decided to ship me out to one of the other companies. Might have needed somebody more or something, I don't know. But I went to L Company, and then when we went over toward, after the war was over, they started releasing people, and I went over to M Company. And that's where I stayed the biggest part of the time when I went up to Garda. I was in M Company. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, thank you very
Well,
much.
that's not very much. It
No,
wasn't
that was
exciting.
great. That was great.
I didn't leave an exciting life,
No,
but it was exciting.
No, it was great. That was great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So here, let me